Hello and welcome to the Craft Beer Corner. For today's beer review, we're jumping into a beer from my favorite, Anchorage Brewing Company. Today's beer is called Happy Alone, and it is an oatmeal milk stout, 8.5% ABV on this one, and it's been aged on coffee, Tahitian vanilla, cinnamon, and has added lactose. Of course, it is a milk stout. So, Anchorage, Alaska, of course, their home base. As always, really great label art on here. It's got their skeleton man that's on a lot of their labels, and he's sitting outside in a heavy winter coat, sipping on his morning coffee by himself. So Happy Alone, a nice bright blue background, kind of a sky blue. Looks very, very nice. Cool art, and as always, they tell us this is another one done by Massive Face. So bravo, as always, Massive Face. Let's get this cracked gently. And we will get this one poured right into the old stout glass. Don't do a ton of milk stouts. I know I've had some from Anchorage, though it's been a while, so I'm really looking forward to this one. This combination of ingredients sounds really great. Wow, that is impressively thick. For only 8.5% ABV, that's unbelievable how thick that is pouring. And I probably didn't need to go that aggressive because it clearly is not having a problem forming a head at all either. But be that as it may, wow, big aromas popping off of this. Just watching in the glass doing its thing. So, visually, it is indeed absolutely pitch black. You never really know what you're going to get. 8.5, that's a pretty high ABV, but it's not ridiculously high. So they clearly got a lot of fermentables in here. It's absolutely pitch black. Now, I know the camera is not likely picking this up, but I can see the carbonation cling on the sides of the glass that's moving very slowly. It is very, very tight, very, very tiny carbonation bubbles that I see, and that would make sense with this ridiculously thick, rich, creamy head. I mean, this looks like it easily could have come off of a nitro tap at a bar. Look at that. That's ridiculous. In all the best ways possible, it's ridiculous. So, let's get right up over this for a full sniff. Oh, man. Wow. What a big, bold combination of aromas. So, the coffee immediately jumps out at you. And it jumps out at you really big while pairing with this underneath roasty malt bill. It smells very, very roasty. This smells like a darker roast coffee that was added to this. Part of that could be coming from just the natural aromas of this rich malt bill, but I expect that they did use a darker roast coffee. It smells very, very rich, very, very prominent. The cinnamon jumps out as well. It's a little more subtle. The vanilla really pops out as well, and that's kind of binding with the cinnamon a bit. So those two are kind of mixing together while the coffee is really binding with the malt bill. That's the way that the aromas are kind of working together. But it smells fantastic, and I can pick all of the additives out of it. This does not smell sweet, though I know they added lactose, so I don't really know if this is going to be one of those overtly sweet milk stouts or if it's really just by definition where they add lactose in to let some of the underlying ingredients pop a little bit. Like cinnamon and vanilla really do pop quite a lot when they're paired with some lactose. The same is true of coffee, but coffee will pop out in most beers anyway. It'll just taste a bit more distinct and easier to discern, oh, that's coffee versus that's the roasty malt bill, as a rule, in a milk stout base. So this head has settled down a bit. It's still incredible. It's still massive. I'm just going to try to gently top this off just a bit, get a bit more beer in the glass near the curve. And yes, this is obviously and clearly going to make a mess in my beard, but we got to do to try this beer. Yeah, that smells incredible. We're going right in. Take one. Oh, it's a big beer, guys. Big beer. The flavor intensity on this is way bigger than I could have possibly anticipated. It's only 8.5%, and it's technically in a milk stout base, but it is really just in definition. This is not a beer that they designed to be sweet. Indeed, it doesn't present itself as sweet. And the lactose is doing exactly what I just said that they could possibly have done with this beer. It's letting the cinnamon and the vanilla pop out clearly. It's letting the coffee also pop out clearly and distinctly from the malt bill. So you get all of these additives in it, and they all have their own big voice, very, very clear, just as in the aroma. But this is not a sweet milk stout. Indeed, this beer has prominent roasty notes, prominent bitters, prominent earthy roasty and earthy roasty bitters. It's a big beer. Big, 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 bold, intense flavors. It is driven and dominated by the underpinning of the roasty malt bill and the coffee. I was right. It's a very big, bold, pungent, dark roast. So essentially, it tastes exactly how it smells. Just if you see the lactose, oh, the milk sugar. Nope, it's not a sweet one. It's a big, bold, intense one with actually quite a lot of roasty bitters. It is absolutely delicious, I can say, and the balance on this is perfection for my money. This underlying malt bill, the blends of malts they used, the added ingredients, it's as perfect in the flavor as it was in the aroma. I absolutely love it. This is a big, big beer. The other thing that, of course, we talk about with relative frequency, you saw how thick and lush and creamy that head is, and indeed still is. This is an oat stout, an oatmeal stout. I always mention this, that if you want to give your beer the best chance of head creation and retention, there is no better ingredient that you can use in your beer. Sure, there are additive, natural chemicals you could put in to add to help with that, but oats, just as a raw ingredient, based by itself, that's the number one best. And this is a great example of exactly what they do. So we're going to jump back in. This is a big beer, a lot to process. Going to let it re-intensify. We'll pick apart this body and this mouthfeel, and we'll talk about this finish. But on first sip, this is a big stout lover stout. I love it. Take two. Body in this is kind of bordering on medium heavy. It's maybe not quite as heavy as I would anticipate, but it's not missing the mark by much. In terms of the mouthfeel is actually even more impressive than I expected it to be. There's a lot of resistance. I mean, I shouldn't be surprised because I saw how thick it looked, which surprised me because it's only 8.5% ABV, but it feels extremely thick. You can really feel the resistance. This one does get pretty creamy as you agitate around the palate, and it really does an extremely good job of coating the palate. Indeed, on second sip, the re-intensification of flavors is just boom. It's right in your face again. And nothing new that I picked out. There's no real subtlety in this beer at all. It is what it is. It's led by that roasty underpinning of the malt bill and the coffee, and the lactose is really there, I think, to let the other additives pop out. The cinnamon and the vanilla, they're working together, and the coffee and the malt bill, they're working together. And then you take all of that and put it into the same beer. It's just a big, intense flavor explosion. I absolutely love it. This is probably, if I were to just, what's that beer about? I wouldn't even say, oh, it's a milk stout. I wouldn't say, oh, it's an oatmeal stout. I would say this is a coffee stout. That would be the most accurate description for somebody that's really curious about what the beer is about. It's a coffee stout. The coffee is big, they're leading with it, and it's pairing with this big, massive, intense, roasty malt bill, and it's just got these other little additives just as a bonus treat. It's absolutely, absolutely delicious. The balance, perfection for my money. Now the finish. It is technically a milk stout, so we'll kind of still use that as the yardstick, but this is not a normal milk stout. So yeah, it's big, it's roasty, it's intense, it's got a lot of earthy, roasty bitters. I would say, if I had to guess, the IBUs, at least in my perception, are easily in the 35 to 40 range, which is really impressive, especially for a milk stout. But it's impressive. And that flavor intensity and these lingering earthy, roasty bitters are really what drives out the length of the finish on this. It's far longer than you would find in your typical milk stout. Impressively long. And what I'm left with lingering on the back of the palate is an equal combination of roasty malt and coffee in tandem with their earthy bitters that they bring to the table. But it's worth noting that even well after a minute and a half, 2 minutes after each sip, even though that's still rather intense in the driver, you can still detect that fleeting cinnamon and vanilla floating on top in the background. So it maintains essentially that same balance from start to finish, including all the way to the very end of the finish. And it's big, it's wet, it's round, it's flavorful, it lingers. You get a lot of mileage on each sip, and you're going to want to because this one is truly delicious. I'm going to take my time sip on this, go at my scores. When we come back, we will get this beer ranked from top to bottom. All right, now that we've gotten to enjoy this beer, we're going to get it ranked. This was Anchorage Brewing Company's Happy Alone, an Imperial Milk Oat Stout clocking in at 8.5% ABV. This one was brewed with coffee, Tahitian vanilla, cinnamon, and lactose. Anchorage Brewing, of course, based in Anchorage, Alaska. So this beer was just spectacular. This is the balance that I really particularly like in a milk stout. Milk stouts, sometimes it's requisite that they be sweet, like a Neapolitan flavored milk stout. Something like a strawberry is not going to taste right without noticeable sweetness, and that blend of ingredients, it really, really works. But in something like this, with these richer ingredients that almost put me in mind of how somebody might take coffee, I think just a little bit of lactose to let the ingredients pop out and taste like they should without the beer actually getting sweet is the way to do it. It's my favorite balance on a beer like this, and they absolutely nailed it. This one was huge. It was another classic Anchorage here that came so close to getting a perfect score across the board. Indeed, only one category where it did not get a perfect 10 out of 10. So we're going to talk about that one specifically, and that was the body. So the body on this was definitely above average in terms of heft. But for an 8.5% ABV, it wasn't quite as weighty as I expected. Again, not off by much, but just wasn't quite there for me. I only docked 2 points though. The body does get an 8 out of 10, which leaves a perfect 10 out of 10 in the remaining 9 categories. That's aroma, taste, mouthfeel, finish, head and retention, appearance, balance, feeling and intangible, an example of style, which leaves the total score on Anchorage Brewing Company's Happy Alone to a 98 out of 100. Guys, this was just about as close to perfection as it gets, and I do mean that. I mean, I'm really splitting hairs and being nitpicky on the body. I mean, this is as near as close to a perfect milk stout for my money as I'm going to find. It was absolutely huge. It's worth mentioning again that this is a milk stout that is not for people that don't like big, rich, bold, more bitter-forward beers. This was not your typical milk stout. There are milk stouts out there like this, but they're much fewer and further between than what most people think about when they think of milk stout, that sweet stout. That is not this beer. This was a big, roasty, intense, bold flavor in your face beer, and they put the lactose in there to let the additives come out, but it was still big, roasty, and bitter. Big beer. I absolutely loved it. If that is the type of beer you like, if you can find this one on Tavour, or if you live in Alaska, go for it. Absolutely worth your time. Folks, that is today's review. As always, I do sincerely appreciate you tuning in today. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. If you want to stay in the loop on our videos go live, just turn on your notifications, hit that bell icon. It is right next to the subscribe button. Until next time, keep it beer, keep it craft. We'll see you on the next one. Cheers.